Well, I'm delighted to be back to CED, to see Charlie and Mike and Joe and many other friends that I've had occasion to work with and appear before over the years. I want to say that any mistakes I make or offenses I commit should be attributed to Bruce McClory, since he's the one who was responsible for bringing me to Brookings 23 years ago and somehow becoming so misguided over the years. Listen, I want to take note of Janet Yellen and the first panel. I just thought they were terrific, sort of lucid and quite insightful, unbelievably witty. They're holding us to a standard we can't possibly meet. But I want to return to that because I think most of you sort of listened to Janet and said, yeah, that makes sense. At least that was the reading I was getting. And I want to propose to you that we have a political party in America now who would deny almost everything that she said. And that really goes to the heart of the matter. I'm going to be exceedingly blunt, although not partisan, and I think Bruce will testify to the fact that I see my job as calling it as I see it, and not sort of, but sometimes viewing these matters through a quote balance is to sort of misdiagnose what's underway, and therefore not be in a position to deal with the problems that we face. Deficits and debt are such a dreary, depressing topic, so whenever I'm called upon to talk about them, to lift my spirits, and I hope yours, I turn to the wit and wisdom of Herbert Stein, one of the great economists of our time, who, of course, said many wise things, one of which was, if a trend is unsustainable, it will stop, which is encouraging. So the fact is, we will get beyond this at some point. The other thing is he had a solution to the problem, which was he suggested a constitutional amendment to require school children to pray for a balanced budget, which I think is also a pretty terrific idea, and it sort of fits the era as well. Religion and politics and economics. Listen, the Bowles-Simpson Commission proposal is one of many. We now have at least a half-dozen plans out there. We're getting increasing clarity about the nature of the problem and what it will take to attack it. There are some common themes across a number of these plans, but there are also some real differences, profound differences that should be articulated and confronted, not somehow swept under the rug. Yet, in every case, Jim said, I think it was Jim who said it, statesmen are former politicians. In every case in these plans are strikingly disconnected from public opinion and from the political system more generally. I thought Jillian's focus on social cohesion this morning was dead on. Think for a minute what is going on in our country. One of the major themes is to take back America. Well, take back from whom? Just what is going on there? There is now sort of questioning in our country about who's American and who isn't. And this is hard to maintain social cohesion in the face of serious problems when these kind of divisions occur. We've always had such movements throughout our history. We've had sort of radical, populist, left and right wing movements. But what has happened in the past is that neither of our major political parties has saw fit to embrace them, to integrate them to sort of follow avidly after them. In fact, during the John Birch days of the early 50s, Bill Buckley was really quite courageous in keeping them out of the Republican Party. In fact, what we're seeing now, and we have to face it, is a real inability to come together in the face of big problems. We saw it with TARP, which thanks to George W. Bush and Hank Paulson and Ben Bernanke, we got through, and frankly, thanks to Pelosi and Boehner. After the Republicans rebelled and that plan went down and the market sunk about 600 points, they came back and did it, but it has been damned by the public and by many politicians, more Republican than Democratic ever since. Same thing with the stimulus. There was no support. The G20 had a plan, but the U.S. couldn't manage to get any House Republicans and had to buy off a couple in the Senate to reach cloture to get a filibuster. And now we're seeing the utter disgrace of a New START treaty, which has broad support in the policy community and among former Republican officials, being filibustered, kept from the floor to death. It raises questions about, are there now such powerful incentives at work in our political system that the opposition party, in its quest to become the majority party in the White House and in the Congress, is obliged to do whatever they can to deny a president any victories, even if they help the country, or avoid some serious problem for the country if it might diminish their probability of getting back into office. More broadly, I think our political system now has a real mismatch between the nature of our parties and the nature of our political institutions. We have parliamentary-like parties, more ideologically polarized, internally unified, and excessively partisan in their dealings with one another, but we don't have parliamentary governing institutions. I mean, at least if we're going to have parties like this, let's let the majority be able to put its program in place and then be held accountable. But we don't have that. The promiscuous use of the Senate filibuster has now required a supermajority on everything, which also empowers individual senators to act. It is the most dysfunctional arrangement in governing systems I've seen in the democratic world in my lifetime. It is really quite stunning. And the problem is worsened by this fact, and here the bluntness. We don't have symmetrical polarization. We have asymmetrical polarization. You know, in the 60s and 70s, it was the Democrats who went off on a tangent and paid a price accordingly. Now it's the Republicans. This is not your father's Republican Party. Ronald Reagan, Bush 41, Bush 43, are not welcome in this party, much less the Senate moderate Republicans who were sort of pillars of policymaking in America for decades. There simply is no room. Jim, I think you can't generalize this. There's still quite a few moderates in the Democratic Party, but it's an oxymoron to say Republican moderate in elective office, and the pressures are so strong on them now that it becomes very difficult. With this asymmetrical polarization and the parity between the parties, there's such an incentive to make every vote relevant to and helpful to one's effort to get back into the majority. So what we have is not just a broad permanent campaign where it's based on individual members looking out for their interests. It is a war. And make no mistake about it, this is how the players view it now, is utter war. And that means you destroy your enemy. And if your enemy happens to be the President of the United States during a very difficult period of time, so be it. You can have brief periods like we had with TARP, thanks to the individuals I mentioned earlier, but then it sort of falls it falls apart. I think all of these factors now have come to dominate our politics in a very unfortunate way. Okay, so what do we do about it? Unlike Jim, I think, I mean, redistricting is a problem, and I'm involved in a project to deal with it, but it's 10% of the problem. It doesn't go to the core of what we're talking about. Money in politics is very disturbing problem and has to be dealt with. But right now I'm talking about another problem, although it's related to it. And my view is that technical, nonpartisan, or pre-cooked bipartisan deals on deficits and debt just won't fly in this political environment. They just won't. They can serve some priming purpose to help begin to get the public to take this seriously, but they're not going to get the job done because of the political dynamics. There are both real, fundamental, serious, ideological differences between the parties, but there's more than that. It goes beyond that. There is a sort of a partisan agenda, too, to win and to keep serious things from happening. Under those circumstances, I actually believe the only thing you can do is try to enlist the parties rather than to deny them or to ask them to deny who they are, and turn to a lesson of game theory. Robert Axelrod, The Evolution of Cooperation, in talking about the defectors, you know, there is a solution if both cooperate. There's a payment, but there's a greater payment if one cooperates and the other defects. The defector comes out ahead. So what is the best strategy for moving back into a cooperative mode? It's called tit for tat. You go at them. You don't try to sort of blur differences or strategies. You talk very clearly about what someone's doing, what they're up to, and how it makes no sense. You take the Republican House agenda to have $100 billion immediate cuts in discretionary domestic spending this year, 25%, and to extend permanently all of the Bush tax cuts and to cut regulation and say, now what in the world is that going to do? How will that help in any way? It's irrelevant at best, but maybe counterproductive given what we heard from Janet Yellen and our other colleagues this morning. It seems to me we have to call things as we see them. We need to restore facts. Pat Moynihan had that famous line, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. No longer true. Everyone has their own facts. And they're reported as facts in the media, whatever their real fact content is. So I think a serious effort has to be made to restore the meaning of facts. Secondly, I think we have to try to get the parties and the politicians to argue over real differences. The campaigns have been banal, and they've been utterly divorced from the substantive differences underlying it. Finally, in dealing with deficit reduction, we can't just deal with it alone and see that as the nirvana that will deal with all of our problems in the future. If we don't link it to the structural changes that offer some hope for us in a situation in which we have a better fiscal balance within the U.S. and in the global economy, we're still going to be facing serious problems. So we need adult talk. We need tough action, tit for tat. We need to rethink our political institutions and, in my view, consider taking some fairly radical action to restore majority rule to the Senate, which is something the framers expected would happen, and we went off on a different course accidentally. Thanks.